I'm recommending people just pay attention to Bitcoin and don't pay attention
Yep.
to altcoins. And then I'm recommending, like, because I'm writing this book and I'm trying to rebrand myself and like have a cohesive brand and better marketing and all that stuff to try to educate people on Bitcoin. And I get a bit of cognitive dissonance sometimes when I'll see some protocol release with higher transactions per second or something like that, and I'll be like, is it really Bitcoin only? Like, should I recommend people just have mostly Bitcoin and then have a little basket of cryptocurrencies that like on some fund manages for them or something like that? Or should people just pay attention to Bitcoin? So I'm constantly doing this to myself, like going and seeing what the heck everybody else is building and trying to validate if there's real value there or if it's just like FOMO or something.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I get a bit of more cognitive dissonance than other times, but like recently with the DeFi narrative and the ETH 2.0
Mm-hmm.
narrative, where like they're
Mm-hmm.
switching to proof of stake, and like there's this whole DeFi movement about decentralized finance, and
Yep.
there's lots of returns being made there, and it's being sold as, look at what Ethereum can do that Bitcoin can't do, so
Yeah.
therefore buy Ethereum. And Ethereum and Bitcoin are in the same conversation there. And
Yeah.
it does trigger me, and it does like trigger my cognitive dissonance, because it's hard to separate the value proposition of Bitcoin from the value proposition of the Ethereum token,
Mm-hmm.
from the utility of Bitcoin and the utility of
Mm-hmm.
the Ethereum network.
Mm-hmm.
So on the one hand, you've got all the reasons I described just before, about why Bitcoin is valuable because of its decentralization. Its issuance is like locked in stone pretty much. We
Mm-hmm.
know how much Bitcoin there's going to be. It's got very strong mimetic properties, right? Like, there's only going to be 21 million Bitcoin, and it's going to take an awful lot for Bitcoin to be censored. So it is
Mm-hmm.
unstoppable. I mean, you could stop it with like every single government in the world turning against it and like arresting everybody that uses Bitcoin. You could stop that, but if it gets big enough, you can't. But then on the other hand, you've got Ethereum, which has already intervened 2 or 3 times. And they originally came out with code as law, which is like you
Mm-hmm.
can write smart contracts, run them, and then no one can stop them. It's unstoppable
Yeah.
code. And then
Yeah.
the DAO smart contract exploit happened, and they totally went against it philosophically. They centralized, because they put it up for a vote for the community to decide what to do, and they didn't get enough participation because people didn't know what to do. So Vitalik and Consensus just decided, we're going to fork this out. So code was no longer law. Now,
Mm-hmm.
to be fair to them, there was like a massive supply of Ethereum in that smart contract. It was like, must have been like 20 to 30% of the whole amount of Ethereum was locked up there. So it was economically worth it for the community to decide to abandon the principles of decentralization to stop the network from death. Because early on in Bitcoin's history, there was a hard fork as well. Like we had to, in 2013, I think there was an inflation bug that got through the code somehow, and like nobody exploited it, but there was a threat that someone could just make unlimited Bitcoin. So the community
Yeah.
hard forked to fix that problem. But it wasn't like a big um contrary like ethos thing like the DAO fork was. And that keeps happening in Ethereum. That keeps happening where the
Mm.
developers. So recently there's a supply issuance that happens in Ethereum where miners get a certain amount of Ethereum every block, right? And they keep changing the issuance. So, Ethereum, you can't be confident that there's only going to be X amount of Ethereum in 10 years because they keep changing the
Mm.
supply issuance. And so there's also this thing with DeFi where most of these decentralized finance companies, because they really are companies, they're not like decentralized. They have admin keys where they can actually lock the contracts and freeze accounts and stuff. And it's happened 3 or 4 times already where somebody exploited a contract and actually profited from some arbitrage, some fancy arbitrage thing. So they're creating this code that should execute, and it does execute, and it should just, it was a good arbitrage these people found, but it was not economically maybe moral, so they freeze it. So we really don't know how decentralized Ethereum is. They keep trying to make it seem like they're decentralized so that the SEC doesn't go after them, I guess. But it's not like they just changed from the DAO hack, because a lot of people like to say, oh, well, that was back in 2015 or whatever, and they haven't done anything like that in years. But they have actually done it. Like every year there's something happening where it's clearly more of a centralization. So when I think about it in those terms, it's totally separating the use case of Bitcoin from the use case of Ethereum, because Bitcoin is decentralized money, right? It's meant to be like free speech money and protecting human rights and privacy and stuff. And as an investment, it's your way to opt out of this unfair system like you were talking about. But then because Ethereum uses a blockchain, it's lumped in with Bitcoin. It's not censorship resistant money. It's not a hard cap supply of money. It's a semi-centralized smart contract, like DApp DeFi platform. That's more like a technology thing. It's more like a company. So
agreed.
It's been muddled up now, and people talk about Bitcoin and Ethereum in the same conversation as if they represent the same thing. And to me, I think like I could talk about Ethereum like I would talk about Tesla or like Amazon stock or something like that, right? It's kind of like nebulous. Like Tesla's at like $1,400 right now. It's got nowhere near that kind of PE ratio. So how do you value anything these days? But yeah, use case of Ethereum is one thing that I don't feel directly translates to the value of the ETH token. And the also you said this about BCH, like if it's used as payments and it becomes widely adopted as this payments protocol because it can do 4 times more payments volume than Bitcoin or whatever, then velocity of money doesn't translate to an increase in the token price. And you're right with that assumption, because I think that's the way it is too. I don't feel like Ethereum, the token either, like ETH token, is a good investment from the perspective of it not being money like Bitcoin is. Like ETH is fuel for smart contracts to get executed. And they are bloated right now. It's their blocks are full, and the price of using Ethereum keeps going up.
Yeah.
Because people are using it. So that's a good thing that people are using it. If you like the Ethereum network, it's kind of validating that there's people wanting to use the network. But as a smart contract platform, the world computer, like they sold it in the ICO, you don't want to be paying 25 cents every time you execute a smart contract. Like every time you trade a CryptoKitty or whatever.
You want like literally fractions of a penny.
And that's what they originally sold it as. They sold it as like a cheap fee version of Bitcoin that can do smart contracts and like machine to machine contracts and stuff like that. And it's been quite a while since it just keeps shifting. The narrative of Ethereum keeps shifting, but I keep getting challenged by a lot of my friends in the crypto space that aren't Bitcoin only guys. And they keep saying, like, it doesn't matter what you think. It doesn't matter what the narratives change to. If the free market will decide, and if there's usage, then it's going to be valuable. So why fight the market, right? But then when I look at the market, it's in terms of fundamental figures like transactions and stuff like that, price, liquidity, like who's actually using it as money. Ethereum is nowhere near Bitcoin. Like ETH currency is nowhere near Bitcoin. It's actually on par with Dogecoin or BCH. Like nobody's using ETH coin, the actual coin, for money. But they're selling it as if buy ETH because, it's going to go up 10x. But then if it goes up 10x, so is the price of using it. It'll be like
Yeah,
$22.50 every time you send a transaction.
but I mean, this is something I've fallen into before, but consciously, right? So like you, I was an early investor in Bitcoin. I got in I think 2011, 2012, right? So like pretty early on, and substantial rewards since that point, right? I didn't maintain all my holdings since then, yes, even though there was a substantial sell-off in 2013 because I'd already, 5 times. But the thing is, and this is, maybe there's some reality to this, maybe there's some fallacy to this, whatever else. But like early on in Bitcoin, like the gains are incredible, right? And to think like, the level of gains that have been achieved and the gains going forward are probably 2 different decimal point eras, right? And so I think what people are looking for is, great, what is going to be the next thing that hits early Bitcoin like multiples? And so the hope is if they can get into other cryptocurrencies early on in their adoption, that something like that will happen. What you've said, and I agree with you, is it's not an apples to apples comparison because a lot of these cryptocurrencies have a different value proposition, substantially different value proposition than Bitcoin did. They don't have the mind share. Bitcoin really is first to market and massive within mind. And then you've got the fact that in some cases it can be a bit of a rigged game, like you've said. Like the people coming up with tokens, and that token is mined 50%, and then 50% is given off to individuals, and so it's not necessarily a fair game either. So all of these things are happening, right? I'm with you. I think that our mindsets are aligned in many ways in this space. Rather than going down this rabbit hole, though, I'm going to just take us off to a little aside, because your question, I think, was around how do you present yourself with this mindset, and how do you help people understand why you're an advocate of Bitcoin and where it could be going forward. What I'm hearing from you is that you're actually, and just let me get the words out. I don't think that you're actually an advocate of Bitcoin, right? You're an advocate of principles of which Bitcoin happens to inhabit the best so far, right? But ultimately, you have principles such as resilience, anti-censorship, store of value, like all these other things that are your actual values. Bitcoin is the one that is gives you the best coverage over your values, and that's why you believe it is the best investment today. And I say that in that the whole Bitcoin versus other cryptocurrencies can get along other type of religious-ish type things. Like, are you a Microsoft guy or a Linux guy or an Apple guy, right? I don't give a fuck. Excuse my language. I don't know if this will ever be presented in the language and everything else, but I don't give a fuck. I use Apple and I use PCs and I use like Linux. I use them all in the right one in the right place. Like, I try not to get into that like religious type argument, right? And so for you and your branding, what I'm hearing you, and I really appreciate this, you're not getting religious like it's Bitcoin and it has to be a Bitcoin because it's Bitcoin. Like, if I had heard that from you in different flavors, unconsciously or otherwise, I'd have a little bit of concern. Instead, what I'm hearing you saying is, again, like going over your underlying values. So I wonder if there's a concept that really resonates with what you're trying to share and take forth, and whether it's money sovereignty or whether it's some type of financial intelligence, or like, is there a larger concept beyond Bitcoin that encapsulates what you really want people to have in their life, the benefit that you want them to have? And like, is there a way to define, at least in some light way, like what the values are that lead up towards that? So then you can see that Bitcoin is being recommended, not because I'm a Bitcoin advocate, not because I'm like religiously attached to Bitcoin, but because, like, if this is what you're after, this financial sovereignty, this financial independence, or whatever else it might be, right? This return on investment, however it is in your mind, here are the things that lead up to it. And you can clearly see that Bitcoin is the path to it. And that also gives you a sanity check. Like you said, when you hear that, okay, cool, I've been on Bitcoin, it's doing these things, but I hear these other things about these other cryptocurrencies, and I need to, in my mind, figure out, I have this cognitive dissonance. I need to now figure out, is my stance still sane, and is it still in line with what I believe it is, right?
Hmm.
Creating a structure around this may help you with your own intellectual comparisons when it comes around this, and ensure that you don't veer off into religiosity when it comes
Yeah,
to
that's
a
good.
particular cryptocurrency. And number two is, if something better comes along, if there is something that is truly superior to Bitcoin, um, it's very easy for you to communicate why you might have had a change of advice towards people, right?
Right.
Because your advice is following a strategy and an ideal and a paradigm. It's not following a product, right?
Yeah.
Versus if you're the Bitcoin guy and something better comes along and you go, sorry guys, it's not Bitcoin, it's this. Then it's like the world's biggest Apple advocate going, sorry guys, you're gonna buy PCs now, right? And people are like, what
Yeah.
the why are you leaving us? Like, I don't understand this. Like, they can't follow your train of thought because you haven't made it transparent, and thus they can't follow you on your journey. But if you can bring transparency to your thought process on this and your values and everything else, people can two things. They can follow you on this journey wherever that may lead, and it leads them towards this place they want to get to and what you're espousing anyways. And it ensures that if their values are different than yours, that they can make intelligent, personally, and this is something I believe highly in. I believe in sovereignty. I believe in empowerment. I believe in agency. Each person should be able to make their own decisions ultimately when it comes to things. And you're essentially giving them building blocks to give them even further sovereignty over their own decisions, which is an empowering thing to the individual, rather than just being the guru who's like,
Hmm.
I say Bitcoin, do Bitcoin,
Hmm.
right? Right.
That,
And
that
so, and
that's
again,
great. Yeah.
I'm putting a lot of my own values into this, and I want to make sure, like, this is nothing that I'm trying to force upon you, but the way that I look at the world, like, these are the values that are important to me, right? And how I like frame up and look at the world. So you have no obligation to me to take any of this on, but if it's useful to you, like, that's how I see this moving forward for you.
I think it's true. Like I I I don't think there's going to be anything that can defeat Bitcoin in terms of its properties of censorship resistance and like the ability for anybody anywhere to be able to take the exit hatch and like opt out instead of trying to climb higher on the ladder. They just like climb up the ladder and exit. You know, that's Bitcoin to me. I do hear a lot of Bitcoiners say all the time, like, Bitcoin might fail. It's not that I'm a Bitcoin only guy. It's that Bitcoin is the thing. And if something else comes along that's better, then I'd probably use that. But nothing has come along that's better. Nothing probably will. And I relate with that as well. It does get a bit tribal, especially if you're engaged in Bitcoin Twitter, like, um,
Yeah.
and I get triggered all the time when I see people I respect, like Andreas Antonopoulos or like any of the early Bitcoin guys that I used to learn about Bitcoin from, start to then talk about Ethereum or any of the other cryptocurrencies, either because they're, I don't know why. I mean, whatever reason it is, whatever motivates them to want to switch to like start talking about something else.
Well, the whole, and I'm going to interrupt here, and then I want you to continue. So please keep it
Yeah.
there, right? But imagine if they were a little more transparent about their thought process, so you could understand why that shift was happening. Imagine how powerful that would be, right?
Mm.
And you could choose to completely disagree. You don't have to follow where they're going, but because they're having a what you see as a logic break, you were here
Yeah.
and now you're here, and I don't understand why you're going from here to here. Then it creates this internal one is you end up with this mental dissonance, this cognitive dissonance you're talking about before, but two, it begins to like create distrust. Oh, I don't know if I can trust your decisions because I thought we were aligned and now we don't seem to be aligned, right? But if they had like literally broken and shown their logic steps between there actually may be a path where you're more aligned than you believe you are. There might be more trust, even if you disagree with their outcomes.
Yeah.
That's why I'm espousing more transparency in how you view these things and why your recommendations are coming. Because
Hmm.
ultimately, trust is the currency. Why is Bitcoin so powerful? Trust. right? At the end of the day, trust. That's
Right.
why it has everything that it has now. And individuals, when you come down to reputation and following and influence and all the things that are becoming more and more prominent and that you're stepping into, trust is it is literally the currency. And so things that improve that, I think, pay incredible dividends going forward.